couple comments up front before we actually get started on today's lecture. Are these handouts worthwhile for you guys?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure before I keep printing these thousands of pages and killing all these trees for the whole thing. We have one more coming in. We'll give it a moment here. For those of you that have taken copies of the book home and read through them, any comments about anything while we're waiting here?
It's hard stopping. Don't read it late in the day. Read it over coffee in the morning.
Thank you very much.
Take it, you got it. Oh,
Let's see now.
it's just,
Well, I think we all read it and think it could happen to us. It could happen to us.
That's the message. It could happen to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yes.
As a matter of fact, my book on this might be titled just that when I finally get around to writing it. If anybody's willing to publish it.
You're
Yeah.
a victim of Madoff thing?
Yeah. Is this your first class?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's the only reason I'm doing this. I mean, I would much rather I wasn't up here, but I started investing with Madoff in 1970, or 1990, and was invested for 20 years with him.
How did you get to him? Through a friend?
Well, that's a longer story, which I'll cover at a different time, or if you like, you can borrow one of our books, okay? It's a book written by 29 Madoff investors, their personal stories. My mom and I are both in the book. Our individual stories are in there. I'm perfectly willing to lend these things to anybody who would like them.
We have two that didn't bring them back.
I think one of them came back. Yeah, if you do borrow them, bring them back. If you want to buy them, they're $15.02 because I make 2 cents on every copy that gets sold. But until we pay it off, basically we got a university to print these things for us. So all the profits from the books go to pay the university back. So at this point, I get 2 cents a copy. Once we pay the university back, I get, I don't know, 1/29th of something like $3. All the money, all the proceeds from this are being donated to NIAP. And NIAP is our other group that I'll talk to you about a little later, which is actively, they're the ones that talk to Garrett about this Bill 757. So for anybody who wants to borrow a book, fine. Anybody who wants an autographed book, it's $15.02. And as I said, the stories I think are compelling. It's really, most of those investors with Madoff look like that. They don't look like the Jeffrey Picowers or the Stanley Chase of the world. And you realize kind of what happened to them. And as I said to you when I came up here, any one of you could be up here giving this lecture and I'd be sitting in the class. If you think we made a mistake, wait till you see some of the stuff we're going to talk about when we show you what the SEC did. Okay. This is, in my opinion, the creme de la creme of the whole lecture series. This is the course, this is the lecture that tells you how I did it. Who was involved, exactly how it happened, exactly what was done. And this one lecture took me about 50 hours to put together, reading hundreds of pages of litigation to figure out exactly what happened. It doesn't come from one source, it comes from many sources. And as far as I know, no one else has done this.
Can it happen again?
Could it happen again?
It's going to.
Happening
Probably
right
going
now.
on right now.
If you think that the SEC has solved the problems, they haven't. They have not. And I gave a little part of a lecture earlier about if you have a brokerage account, what you can do to sort of protect yourself from exactly what happened here. You're not going to like it. And I'll make sure you guys get copies of lecture 1 and 2 so you can see some of it, and I can chat about that when we have a little more time. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about BLMIS, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. 2 parts of the business. One was litigation, and one was a major criminal activity and had been for decades. We're going to talk about the major players, who was involved, and what they actually did. And then the anatomy of a crime, how the scam actually worked, what they did on a day-to-day basis to make this thing go, and then where the money came from. And actually, before I do this, I want to show you something. J.P. Morgan Chase. I'll tell you about it later. I can't turn that thing off unless I pull the plug. All right. Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick will be here April 19th. Okay? Big deal. Show up for this. We're going to badger him. The week before we do this, before he shows up, we are going to do the class on legislation. that'll cover not only House Bill 757, but all the bills that have been introduced over the last 2 years. So you'll have an idea of Congress and what they planned on doing and who is involved and the almost complete lack of support for any kind of congressional action on this at all. And I just want to show you some of this thing, whoops, for what actually occurred here. What I said was, this is from Jennifer Dunigan, who is his secretary that sets up appointments. And I said, the date of April 19th is fine, the class is 90 minutes. I would plan on having Mr. Fitzpatrick speak for about 15 minutes, then there will be questions from this group about how the SEC and Congress is addressing the issues involving regulating the securities market. By this point in the class, the attendees will have had a very good idea of the role played by the SEC, CIPIC, and congressional hearings and legislation in addressing the effect of the fraud. Mr. Fitzpatrick can stay as long as he wishes and participate in the lecture to any great degree he desires. Now, this is important because I want to get to him first before he shows up in here. What they want to do is have him come in 30 minutes before the class and have me talk to him. It's not enough time. I would be pleased to meet with Mr. Fitzpatrick at any time, any day, and anywhere, even the District of Columbia. To be effective at this class, he should be brought up to speed about why the class is even being given. I will absolutely meet with him at 8:30 on April 19th, but that will not allow much time to digest the information. The choice of when and where to meet is yours. Next week, Tuesday, I plan to inform the class that Mr. Fitzpatrick will attend on the 19th. Let me know if this changes. They're really looking forward to my 3 guest speakers. Kathy Watson from the PA House, as I said, will be here next month on the 22nd, March 22nd. Kathy Watson has been an absolute great thing for us to happen. Of course, it's working with the state. That's not where the money is. The money's with the feds. Okay, Michael Fitzpatrick, Federal House is coming. He's a big deal. He stands on the House Financial Services Committee. He's the vice chairman. He is really important because he can offer some of these bills, and I want him to co-sponsor 757 if we have to get him to draw blood to sign it. And then finally, we may have Erin Avalon, who is a Barron's Magazine author and has recently published in the Philadelphia Magazine as well as People, and she's been in the Philadelphia Inquirer lately, and she's written 2 books on this topic. This says, could the Congressman speak to the group on April 19th? Also, he can come at 8:30 to meet with you before he speaks. How long will he be expected to speak? Please let me know the location and what time to arrive. So again, they're expecting this to be a short visit. I'm not.
What's Ms. Watson's title?
She's on the PA House of Representatives. Okay, feedback forms. Okay, what we have is week 1 is in red, week 2 is in blue. We have the same numbers over here. Somebody's still rating me a 4 on one item. And this is kind of interesting. I feel more or less trusting. We had a little move towards less trusting. We've had a little move towards the left of less trusting of the government regulatory agencies. A little move to the right. The course was, the lecture was relevant for me personally. A huge move in terms of the securities market being a scary place. A big move, and secure people are not being protected from fraud in the securities industry, and of course you're not. Much less trusting of financial advisors. And all ones in terms of Madoff investors are not being treated fairly by the system, which I'm glad to see that at least I've made an effort to show you that we haven't. This was an article in AM New York news article in 216 by Eric Ortiz. I actually talked to him for about 30 minutes on the phone. I'm sort of on the call list for some of these reporters up in New York. So I give interviews whenever I can for them. Madoff victims see no compassion from Ponzi schemer. Where's the compassion for us? Well, what this is about is that the owner of the New York Mets and the co-owner of the New York Mets is being sued by the trustee for something like $1 billion. And Fred Wilpon and Saul Katz were sort of semi-insiders in this. And Bernard Madoff gave a jailhouse interview to a reporter, Diane Enriquez, from the New York Times about 2 weeks ago. And she is publishing a book also coming out in the late spring And during that thing, Madoff talked about the idea that the owners of the Mets knew absolutely nothing. The degree of compassion that Madoff has for someone who owns a baseball team isn't the same degree of compassion for someone who lost their life savings, said me. I really don't care what Bernard Madoff thinks or what Bernard Madoff says, Sabita added. If you're a criminal and you show no remorse and no compassion, there's really no reason for me to believe anything you say. And basically, Bernard Madoff, during this interview with Diane Enriquez, talked about the people that knew, and he said things like, well, the bank should have known. How could they not have known?
Yeah.
They say all this money going back and forth, they don't see any trading activity. They're making huge amounts of money. Some of these investment advisors were being paid a 4% commission from Madoff and a 20% of profits from their investors.
Wow.
They had blinders on, making huge amounts of money. The owner of the Mets even went so far as to, he was a net winner of about $300 million.
Wow.
But he actually did a lot more than that. What he was doing is taking player contracts that were loaded into the future, and he was investing some of the money that was being used to pay them with Bernard Madoff, and letting that accrue to actually make the payments 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years in the future. So he was almost using it like an annuity. Those players aren't going to get paid. The money's gone. So some of these players that signed 10-year contracts with $10 million down and $10 million a year for the next 5 years, where the owner of the Mets deposited the money with Bernard Madoff in a feeder fund, that money is gone. I don't know what happens in terms of baseball for that.
So can they get out of their contract, or they're obliged, since they signed it, they have to stick it out?
I have no idea how that's going to work. No idea at all. The owner of the Mets is trying to sell 20 to 25% of the team right now because he expects to pay back $300 million, which is his net winning. The trustee, from what I understand, is suing him for $1 billion. The litigation was sealed. They just opened it, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet to see exactly what the numbers are. But the Mets may be lost as a function, as a result of this. Bernard Madoff, by the way, was a big insider. He had his own jacket, Mets jacket with the name Madoff emblazoned across the back, which sold for something like $30,000 during one of the liquidations of Madoff property. And by the way, you want to talk about taking advantage of the system. There was an article in a local Philadelphia newspaper about a liquidation sale. And it said, liquidation sale, Madoff property underneath. And when you read down, you read that printing that's about 1/10 of an inch high, it says some of the items are from Madoff.
Yeah.
I made it believe that all the items were from Madoff. It turns out they had one piece of jewelry. One piece of jewelry that was from the Madoff liquidation sales. Okay. Who do government regulators actually serve? And this was by Larry Doyle, Sense on Sense, on February 17th, just recently. And what he did is he named the relationship between regulators and Wall Streeters as Wall Street-Washington incest. The technical term for this relationship is regulatory capture as defined below. Really interesting comment. The process by which regulatory agencies eventually come to be dominated by the very industries they were charged with regulating. Regulatory capture happens when a regulatory agency formed to act in the public's interest eventually acts in ways that benefit the industry it is supposed to be regulated rather than the public. Remember what I told you about earlier? You go to college, you go to work for the SEC, you learn the ins and outs of how to do things, and then you go work for private industry and you have a 5 to 10 times increase in your salary. And then the people that kind of figured it all out are working in industry, and they can sort of hoodwink some of these brand new people coming from college to work for the SEC. Poorly trained, poorly motivated. Don't shake up your future employer. Don't do things to annoy them because they're going to be hiring you in the future for the big money. So why would you ever want to do something to rock the boat when that's where the bread really is, your training program and your internship?